Hey everyone, Jay Wilburn, Captain Three Kidneys, here to do another video. Talking today about telling your story. I work as a writer for a living. I do that full time and have been for a few years now. Novels and short stories, and for a while I was ghostwriting and doing freelance as well. But I've kind of reached a point where I can sort of push my own writing and sort of make a bit of a living doing that completely. One of the things I did with ghostwriting was I did a number of biographies. Sometimes they were corporate, sometimes they were personal or self-help, people kind of sharing their stories. And it was always an interesting process because you would write, I would interview the people and they would tell their story. And even when a person is trying to shape their story around their own life, and you don't want to make yourself look bad, they always let slip the stuff that's going on, their flaws and the struggles that they had and things like that. And I would pick up on things in their lives that kind of led them to where they were. And every story, everybody that wanted to tell a biography had some bad stuff that went on in their lives. There was things that happened to them that were tough, and the first chapters then have to kind of begin where things are going badly, and then the book moves into where they have redemption and recovery and stuff like that. So that first chapter was always very, very rough. Like I would get a feel for the person's voice and their story, and I would tell that first chapter of that first sort of rough moment in their life that they were sharing. And I always knew there was going to be a time period that they were going to have to deal with that. So I would give that chapter back to them, and I knew it was going to hit hard, like hearing their own story and their own voice, and then my perspective from the outside, seeing things that had happened in their lives that led them to where they were. It was a bit of a gut punch for them, and took some time. And we always had to have a moment where we were talking through it and what we wanted to include. And those first few chapters always took a while, and then we would kind of get the flow of it and realize that we were really telling their story together. There's a lot of power in a story, and my online stuff. I have opinions about politics and religion and things like that, but I've never really felt. No, I'm not going to say that. In recent years, I've never really felt that I wanted to sort of push an idea or try to convince people of anything, like in a post or that kind of thing. It just never felt like a valuable use of words. So any idea that I've always felt like was worth discussing was worth telling in a story, a short story, a novel, and telling from a character's perspective, not necessarily, okay, this is what Jay Wilburn thinks, so now this is what the protagonist of the story thinks. I've always found it more interesting to take on someone else's point of view and present it in a logical way. So, I'm a religious person, but very often, I make the atheists or people of different perspectives the protagonists in the story, and then sell their viewpoint in a logical way. And the way I've been able to do that is that I find other people's stories interesting. I have people tell me what they think and where they're coming from, and kind of absorb that instead of trying to impose my own on there or making a debate. I find it more interesting to just hear their story out, and then that becomes characters and viewpoints within a work. And I think it makes a story richer because you don't necessarily have the author imposing an idea on. My own viewpoint can be the villain. My own viewpoint can be the hero, and then you can mix and match that as well, and have characters with flaws, characters with layers, and a story that's actually feels like something deep. And I find that interesting. Dealing with the Matters of Faith podcast, when we do have guests on, I'm trying to pull in people that have different perspectives from me. So there's always this period of time where I'm talking with people and convincing them that I don't have an agenda, that I want to hear their story, and when they come on, they get to tell their story, and the interview is basically just drawing their story out. And I find that interesting, and I think it means something to people. And when it comes to your story, that your work that you've been through, your struggles, it doesn't matter that it's different from other people. It doesn't matter that there's somebody out there that has it worse or whatever that is. You'd be surprised how powerful your story can be because it is your story, because it is a perspective that others don't have. There's insights that you have that you may not even realize that you've put together that are actually helpful to others. And when we do take the time to tell our stories, it can have an impact on other people. And especially if we're telling it not from a viewpoint of trying to judge others or convince others, but to just share what we've been through. And then other people get the idea, well, I'm not alone in this, or There's others that are dealing with this, or there's others that have figured things out that maybe this can help me. And I find that's really the power of a story, whether it's in a book or something that's told on a podcast or these videos or what I share online about what I'm going through. There's power in a story. You just share the story and you let people draw the conclusions that they're going to draw. And everybody comes from a different viewpoint, a different perspective, and they're going to draw different conclusions. But there's power in that. If you force a particular conclusion, you know the full extent of the power of your story. If you leave it open for people to kind of bring their own selves into it and then draw their own conclusions, then there's a much wider range of possibility within a story, and that's where stories really hold their power. So I would encourage you, whatever you're going through, whatever you're dealing with, share your story because it's going to help you, to deal with what you're dealing with. But it inevitably is going to help others who hear your story and take some kind of meaning from it. So again, your story has power. Share your story, and I'm always looking for guests on a podcast. So if you feel like that's something that you're interested in, I'd love to have you on the Matters of Faith podcast. Even if you come from a perspective where you don't hold faith or you have issues with religion, again, wouldn't bring you on as an argument, but would bring you on to just talk about what you're dealing with, what you're going through, that kind of thing. The link to in the description, if you're watching this on YouTube, is going to be one of the past episodes of the Matters of Faith podcast, where we deal with some of the ideas and questions that are being brought up by listeners that are just kind of asking, and then me, not being a biblical scholar, but just from my own perspective, answering what I think about particular things. So once you finish watching the video, check out that link and listen in on what some people have asked and the best answer I was able to come up with. So thank you very much. Thank you for your story. I'm grateful for all the stories I've heard, and for this I will rise up and be thankful. I'll talk to you again tomorrow.